The Lycanthrope and The Witch are two upcoming tabletop RPGs by Minds Vision out of Brazil. If that name sounds familiar, it's because I've covered a few of their games on this channel already. The Legacy of Cthulhu, Infernum, and Nomads Unbound have all been relatively quite rules light and solo forward games with a pretty clear-cut theme. These two games, which are crowdfunding at the time of this recording, links are below, are really a part of a family of games that includes The Legacy of Cthulhu as well as one other Minds Vision game that I haven't covered, The Vampire Alone in the Darkness. They are all intercompatible in terms of their mechanics. In this video, I want to cover a couple of things. One, I want to show you the overall setting, play options, and game mechanics for the Lycanthrope and The Witch. Then two, I want to share some insights into the Brazilian RPG scene, as it was told to me by one of the Brazilians on the Minds Vision team. I think you might find some of it pretty fascinating. Then finally, I'll give you my wish list and my pros for the Lycanthrope and The Witch. It should be noted that the layout and artwork for these two books are not in their final form. That stuff is still being worked on, but the mechanics and design of the game themselves are pretty much locked in. I think as far as the campaign offerings go, you'll be able to get the Legacy of Cthulhu as well as the Vampire for completion's sake, and there will be some accessories and 3D printable STLs. Also, there will be an additional book called The Legacy of Cthulhu Advanced Rules and Tables that will contain advanced rules for combat, including threat management and mass combat, how to adapt the game to settings like medieval fantasy, western, and other themes, new pre-made enemies and NPCs, tables for situations and items, and this will be compatible with all games in the collection. I don't have any of that stuff in front of me at the moment, so you'll need to click on the link below to get more details on those particular features. For now, let's go ahead and see what the Lycanthrope is all about. The book will run about 86 pages. That's about the same as Mind Vision's previous games. They're always pretty rules light games, but there's actually a specific cultural reason for that I'll cover towards the end of this video. This game is designed, almost optimized, I would say, for solo and cooperative play where there is no GM. Now, I was able to play this game a little bit myself solo, but in prior experiences with other co-op RPGs, I've actually found it kind of difficult for the group to not naturally resort to a GM, someone to just sort of corral the information and present it. I'd actually love to know down in the comments if you've been able to play cooperative RPGs without any sort of natural lurching into having a master of ceremonies at some point. You can also just play this game with a GM, which is probably how most of you would play it anyway. The setting for Lycanthrope should probably sound pretty familiar to you. There's this ancient curse, it turns people into raging animals on every full moon, it's hereditary, and also spreads through bites. And these so-called lycanthropes have organized themselves into packs. I'm not super into werewolf mythology as presented in RPGs, so I don't know how much of the following stuff I'm about to show you is original versus just derived from previous werewolf-themed games, but I did enjoy some of these features. The first is that lycanthropes in this setting are hunted by an ancient, ruthless order of hunters called skinners. These are largely just sadistic killers and torturers who are hell-bent on killing or enslaving lycanthropes. The second is that there are lineages defined by region and culture and based largely on real-life regions and cultures, and each of these lineages also confers a bonus ability or two. There are the Arbak Apok, who hail from what is now modern-day Spain. They are the arch-enemies of the Brujeria, a covenant of witches that you can actually play as in the other RPG that I cover in this video, The Witch. Then there are the Hamtamr, who have a sort of Norse theme going for them. They are fabled to have raided alongside the Vikings as beasts of war. The Lougarou are from France. They're fast and the least warlike among the lineages. It's probably impossible not to notice at this point that not all of these lineages of lycanthropes actually turned into werewolves, and that brings me to the third, possibly unique, possibly derivative feature of this game that I really appreciate. It's the fact that this game is really about werebeasts, not just werewolves, and that opens the door to a lot more interesting flavor and just variation in the kinds of supernatural monsters that you can play as and encounter. The Eanilsen here are more cat-like and hail from South America. The Oborotan are from Russia and they're were-bears. The Volkadlak are wild boar creatures from Eastern and Central Europe. They're noted to be particularly at odds with that region's vampires. There are special abilities that your character can get. There are 4 basic so-called mimetisms. Depending on which lineage you pick, you'll have a choice from 3 special mimetisms. Actually, if you look at all of the abilities across all of the lineages here, you get a pretty good idea of what this game is wanting you to do, and that is to either fight or deceive NPCs, but mostly fight. I mean, it is a werewolf game, so what do you expect? Combat is extremely straightforward. You're always just rolling a single d10 and adding the applicable core stat and a +2 bonus if you have a skill that applies, and adding that up to meet or exceed a target of 10. Any points above 10 on that sum will give you either more damage, affect a target's stance, which is their mental HP basically, or give you a bonus on future mental checks against that same target. And these are 1-to-1 bonuses, which is something I really like. Every point counts. Gameplay itself is largely centered around a hex crawl procedure where you track the hours of the day, traveling from one hex of an area to another. And depending on the type of hex you've encountered, you have different event and encounter tables that you roll on. In the game at present, there is an example hex map that is supposed to represent Sao Paulo. The actual procedure is that you move to a new tile, then choose an action like buy something, search for a new haven or safe house type of area, or find another lycanthrope. Then you roll for an event. There are a number of tables, and these are critical for playing the game solo or co-op. They usually require you to roll 2d10 and interpret the results. There are also about 4 pages dedicated to a general oracle that will also be used for solo and co-op play. And finally, there are 9 types of enemies statted at the end of the book, some with subtypes and some with just 1 entry. I forgot to mention, you're meant to not only keep track of the hours of the day as you crawl across a city hex, but also the days of the month on this foreshortened lunar calendar. Every time there's a full moon, your character will lose the ability to control themselves and turn into their animal form. If you're a tame lycanthrope, then you only lose control for a short while, but if you're a wild one, then the destruction could be pretty extensive. I think this could be a bit of a challenge for players to be able to faithfully make choices for their characters while in Berserker Beast mode that are not in their character's best interest. I'm always seeing players trying to preserve their character's life and health, sometimes to the point where the fiction suffers as a result. So if players are too self-preserving, I can see it being very difficult to really depict their character as totally losing control on the full moon. Each day you do survive will give you exactly 1 experience point, and these points can be spent on core stats, new skills, and new mimetisms from your path or other paths. But okay, that's essentially the lycanthrope. Let's take a look at the witch. The witch is largely the same game as the lycanthrope in terms of dice resolution, combat, and how the special abilities are divvied up. The setting and theme are obviously different. Instead of lineages, you have covenants, and instead of packs, you have covens. Instead of ruthless skinners, you have ruthless inquisitors. The different covenants that you can choose to be from are really what color the storytelling experience, in my opinion. They all have different goals and ways of practicing their magics. There is the Golden Dawn, which started in England and possesses the largest, most complete arcane library in the world. They are sort of the most bookish and scholarly of the witches. The Brujeria are from Spain. They are the oldest and maybe the most powerful in terms of raw arcane power. They tend to lose their temper and create huge magical mishaps, though. The fairy tradition was born in California in the 1960s and are focused on the sensual and on sexual mysticism. They're influenced by the hippie movement, as well as Buddhism, Hinduism, and North American shamanism. The Onmyodo are sort of warrior witches from Japan who have traditionally battled ghosts and vampires. It's interesting that these guys have some pretty exotic sworn enemies, but most of the other covenants don't seem to be fighting the same supernatural battles, at least not according to these relatively short descriptions. Rose Cross is the generally European covenant. They also seek knowledge like the Golden Dawn, but they're much more connected to the corporations and governments of the world. They are the most widespread and prolific of all the covenants. And finally, there are the Zangbeto, the African covenant that draws from voodoo traditions and ancestral guardian spirits. They actually have a sworn supernatural enemy as well, a certain brand of vampires. There are 8 groups of spells that you can draw from, or paths. These are going to be deeply familiar to you if you have any sort of experience with D&D 5e. Abjuration, divination, conjuration, enchantment, evocation, but you're only getting 5 spells per path. One thing I do appreciate in this game that I didn't see much of in Lycanthrope is how there's just more in terms of social and otherwise non-combative problem solving with these spells. I think that really opens up the play experience a bit. Oddly, you see the same weapon types listed here as you do in Lycanthrope. I think all of these weapons make sense in that game and in a game like the Vampire, but here, I think it would have been cool if they had come up with some more witchy counterparts to these weapons. And likewise for armor, I just can't picture a lot of witches wearing tactical or medieval armor. The play cycle is the same as Lycanthrope. You're crawling your way across a city, rolling on event and encounter tables. Obviously, there can be more to it, such as an overarching goal or mystery or objective of some sort. There are about 5 pages here towards the end of the book that give you some tables for running the game solo and co-op, and for generating those overarching plots. As mentioned at the start of the video, I got some really interesting insights from the team at Minds Vision about why the Brazilian RPG scene feels so distinct from what we're used to in the US. It's not just about different tastes in genres, it's actually about the history of where and how the RPG community formed over there. Back in the mid-90s, Vampire the Masquerade hit the scene and exploded in Brazil, probably becoming the biggest LARP scene outside of Europe. And when you look at the context, it makes total sense. Brazil was deeply urban and restructuring after a long period of dictatorship that ended in the 1980s. You had this backdrop of social inequality and political corruption, so a game system built entirely around secret societies, status, negotiation, and moral tension didn't just feel like a game for a lot of Brazilians. It mirrored the reality of their society at the time. On top of that, the publisher Vieira did a great job of keeping White Wolf books translated and in print, while other RPGs were sort of hit or miss or never even arrived at all. So the culture there evolved to view role-playing less as a tactical number crunching exercise and more as a social performative experience. This is the cultural reason I teased earlier regarding the rules-light nature of these books. If you feel like these games are mechanically loose or incredibly open compared to American designs, that is 100% intentional. They prioritize mood, relationships, and consequences over tactics and character optimization. Fast forward to the COVID lockdowns, and Brazil saw a massive boom in solo RPGs. Creators needed an outlet where they couldn't meet up socially, so they started designing games that paid homage to that classic World of Darkness vibe. High difficulty and high tension, but built from the ground up for solo play. So while the Lycanthrope and The Witch definitely share some DNA with White Wolf games, if you haven't already noticed that by now, they aren't trying to just copy them. They're really an homage to that era in 90s Brazil, evolved in a new direction to fill the gap for players who miss that specific style of narrative-first gameplay. But alright, here's my wish list for Lycanthrope and The Witch. A cap on stats, skills, and mimetisms or spells. I feel that if you don't put a maximum on these things for characters, they could get to the point where they never fail a roll, ever, and that's not fun. More on Skinners and Inquisitors. I'm intrigued by the natural arch enemies of the Lycanthropes. They come in the form of these hunters whose orders have been around for centuries. Not only could you fill several pages describing these enemies, you could make whole separate RPGs about them where you play as them. Put a max and current for HP, stance, and willpower. The character sheets need to break out the space for HP, stance, and willpower into 2 spaces each for max and current, since these are point pools that are constantly changing. Immediate group play. These games have such an undeniably simple set of rules that you could just sit down with any group and almost immediately start playing. There's something to be said for that, seriously. Free time seems so precious and rare these days, at least for me, and I feel like I'm wasting my time anytime I spend more than a minute trying to find or decipher a rule out of some 360-page rulebook. There is absolutely none of that in these games. Easy to solo. These games honestly feel like they were solo games first and multiplayer games second. They are optimized for low friction journaling and solo storytelling. The themes are automatic. Werebeasts and witches are pretty well covered in Western culture. You don't have to strain the imagination to fill in the many gaps that these games create in their pursuit of staying under 100 pages each. Everything is cross-compatible. There are some mechanical differences between Lycanthrope and Witch and Vampire and Cthulhu here, but they are not very big differences, and the core dice mechanics are identical, so for what it's worth, these games are compatible with each other, and their lore does occasionally connect with one another. Anyway, that's it for now. I'll leave a link for the crowdfund project for these two games down below. Let me know your thoughts on these games so far, and I'd also love to hear your thoughts about Brazilian game culture and if you have any insights of your own. Like and subscribe for more RPG reviews and join the channel as a member for exclusive videos and content. Links for everything are below. I'll see you in the next one.